Top officials in the Biden administration panic and are worried as a major U.S. city is on the verge of total economic collapse, which is only the start of the spread that will then infect many other cities all across the country and begin wiping everyone out left and right.
It's all fun and games until the corporations start feeling the pinch in their wallets. Us as consumers have been feeling the pinch in our wallets for a couple years already, but corporations have been riding high on the hog, record corporate profits, and all has been great for them, which probably really helps push along this narrative that the economy is doing so great. Well, that is starting to change because corporate profits are starting to slow down, especially in the first quarter of 2024. Finally. Right now, according to the Commerce Department, corporate profits declined by 0.6% in the first quarter after a 4.1% gain in the prior 3 months. So it was the first decline that we've seen in over a year, and they're saying this is happening because people just don't have the money, guys. People are spending less money everywhere. Everyone's budget is getting spread thinner and thinner across different sectors of the economy. And naturally, some people stop spending money altogether on some things, and they lower spending on other things. So it'll be funny to see how soon or how fast this narrative of a strong economy will continue now that businesses and big corporations are starting to feel this cool down. Because they're even saying that a cooler economy is limiting these businesses' ability to raise prices, which will help slow inflation in the second half of the year. So yeah, this is a good thing for inflation. As far as slowing it down, it's not going to reverse it, but it will slow it down. However,
and it's happening right now in Chicago. Drop a comment. Let me know if you live in Chicago, because this is going to resonate with you guys the most right now. And so the Biden administration is facing a crisis as a major U.S. city teeters on the brink of collapse, raising concerns that this situation could spread to other major cities across the country within months. This development poses a severe threat to an administration that has been counting on the strength of the U.S. economy and the labor market for its re-election prospects. So let's go ahead and dive right into today's story. And the first is from Zero Hedge, which highlights this issue. This situation is politically troubling for the Democratic Party, as the state of Illinois, a traditionally Democratic state, may be at risk if Chicago's economic woes continue. Historically, severe economic downturns have made it difficult for incumbent presidents to win re-election. And the Chicago PMI report indicates accelerating contraction in new orders, employment, inventories, supplier deliveries, and production, while prices paid have increased, suggesting a stagflation depression where economic activity crashes but prices continue to rise. But in the end, if Chicago's issues spread to other cities, it could spell trouble for Biden's re-election hopes, which are heavily reliant on a strong economy and labor market. The Chicago Purchasing Managers Index, the PMI, which is a crucial economic indicator, has plummeted to depression levels, signaling a weakening economy. The latest data shows how after a disappointing drop to 37.9 last month, the index fell even more, dropping to 35.4, a low not seen since the peak of COVID-19 and the global financial crisis. This unexpected decline is a critical problem for the administration, as it indicates the underlying economy might be much weaker than it appears, and this data suggests a hidden weakness in what many have claimed to be a robust economy, and implies that similar declines could hit other cities soon. If Chicago's economy continues to falter, it could lead to higher unemployment and a broader economic downturn, impacting other cities across the country. Historically, when the manufacturing sector slows down, unemployment rises, which could lead to a full-blown recession by the time of the next election. And the manufacturing sector's struggles are already being mirrored in other cities, such as Philadelphia, where similar data shows that slowdowns lead to rising unemployment. This is particularly problematic as manufacturing jobs are typically higher paying than service sector jobs, and their loss has widespread economic repercussions. And this scenario makes it very difficult for any sitting president to be reelected. Rising prices amid a contracting economy, which is a phenomenon known as stagflation, are also concerning. The data shows new orders, employment inventories, and supplier deliveries are all contracting in Chicago, with only prices paid increasing. This could mean higher costs for consumers and businesses alike, despite an overall economic slowdown. Consumer behavior is also shifting because consumers are already feeling the pinch with higher living costs and less spending power. But with increasing auto and home insurance costs and other price hikes adding even more burden affecting both consumers and employers, this ongoing economic strain further exacerbates the political challenges for the Biden administration. And despite some beliefs that the economy is strong, polls indicate widespread dissatisfaction with economic conditions, and many blame President Biden. People are maxing out credit cards and struggling with buy now, pay later loans as household debt reaches record levels and wage growth slows. And as household debt reaches record levels and wage growth slows, spending is likely to drop further, pushing the economy deeper into recession. Even the housing market is showing signs of strain. Home sales and new contracts are declining as buyers are priced out. With fewer buyers, home prices may start to fall, further affecting the broader economy. And as the country edges closer to a recession with rising unemployment and persistent inflation, the Biden administration faces significant hurdles. Economic factors, particularly the cost of living, are likely to dominate voters and their concerns in the upcoming election. While some argue that presidents have limited control over inflation and economic cycles, public perception and dissatisfaction still remain high. Now remember, the political elite have been telling us all along that everyone's been getting ahead. They're getting ahead, right? Remember that? But we all pushed back and said, no, not so fast. And sure enough, when we look at the consumer price index that you guys will see here in blue against total compensation, this average hourly earnings multiplied by average weekly hours of production and non-supervisory employees, both shown on a year-over-year rate of change, what we can note is right now the data suggests the average consumer is indeed ahead of consumer prices. But there's something missing because spending is dropping. And what's not being captured in this monthly data series is what's happening in between, which is hours are getting cut. We're seeing this happen in every single survey report. Hours cut, more hours cut, less hours. And this is not a good sign. This means, of course, as we all know, consumers do not have the spending power to keep up with inflation, to keep the economy running with less working hours. And when we look at household demand, we note that it's getting worse too. And once fueled by steady job and income growth, it is showing signs of cooling. The BA's report showed inflation-adjusted outlays for services rose just 0.1%, and this is the smallest gain from August. Spending on merchandise decreased 0.4% last month, which matches what we're hearing from retailers like Kohl's, who said that they can't even sell stuff that's on clearance and putting it further deeper into discounts. And that's telling you that consumers are indeed tapped out. Good outlays were restrained by declines in gasoline and vehicle purchases, while healthcare spending supported outlay for services. Other categories such as restaurant meals, recreation, and transportation decreased during the month. And from some of my contacts here where I'm at, this is being validated. And we have a couple busy weeks here, and yet the restaurant staff around here are telling us that they are not that busy. Again, all a sign the economy is indeed slowing at the wrong time. And again, for, of course, the top Biden officials, this is the worst possible news that they could be facing. And looking ahead, with household debt hitting a record, consumer confidence generally trending lower, and interest rates at 2-decade high, it remains to be seen what extent consumers will continue powering this economy. But honestly, it doesn't really remain to be seen. We already know. And that's the issue here. Consumers are now facing the reality that they can't afford these higher prices. They're loaded up, their credit cards are maxed out, they're even running behind, and they're buying now, paying later on loans that they took out earlier this year. And they're finding out that they don't have the spending power and they're not getting the hours that they want at work. We know for a fact that their spending is going to drop, and so too is the economy. And while demand for workers is still relatively healthy, at least, well, based on the headline data, the pace of wage growth, and as we noted, and we knew that this was going to happen, is in fact cooling, and overall incomes rose 0.3% in April as wages and salaries advanced at 0.2%, which is the smallest gain in 5 months, which is telling us what we've been warning, and that wage growth is heading back to pre-pandemic levels. And this is, of course, not what employees want, and they need their wages to keep pace, and it's not working at all. In fact, the biggest problem employees are facing right now are gasoline prices. And you can look at total compensation shown in red against gasoline prices, and this from dollars per gallon. And you can see when total compensation growth slows in red against rising gasoline prices, well, what happens next? Well, usually we end up in a recession. And you see that happening here going into the global financial crisis. Wages were slowing, expenses were rising, meaning they could not afford the discretionary side of the income. Next thing you know, we're in an all-out recession, and we're seeing that happening right now. And it's being validated again by companies like Walmart, McDonald's, Target, Burger King. They're all saying the same thing, and that is discretionary sales are declining, consumers are going broke, they're out of money, and we see that in the report from last week as real or inflation-adjusted disposable income, the main support to consumer spending, fell 0.1% in April, the second decline in the last 3 months. And this means, of course, wages are not keeping up with inflation. The savings rate, get this, held at 3.6%, matching the lowest since the end of 2022. And this, of course, means consumers do not have a savings to back up their spending. At some point, they're going to prioritize building those savings accounts back up again, but it's going to come along with a big cut in spending. But of course, that's what's going to trigger the economy to head into a deep recession. And we're even seeing it in the housing market here, where the headline is, home buyers are starting to revolt over steep prices across the U.S. And this is exactly how stagflation depressions end, when consumers realize that they can't afford it and they stop spending. As house hunters of all kind are being squeezed out of the market sales in new homes, a bright spot for the inventory-constrained market fell on April as contracts to purchase existing homes that month slumped to the lowest level in 4 years. The pullback is causing listings to accumulate rather than getting matched with buyers, and something that we warned would happen, because when you see builders have too much inventory, they have to cut the margin. And when they cut, this will put pressure on the secondary market, and the next thing you know, prices at some point will start to come down. Talk about timing, right? Well, that's the key here. We've seen the economy slow down at the worst possible time, because going into the summer months, this is where a lot of spending happens. And historically, typically, a lot of businesses are reliant to get on the summer months for their revenue because they have virtually no business in the winter months. And this is dangerous, folks. Look at the housing market now. The spring selling season so far is definitely a disappointment at the beginning of the year. Some thought they would have seen sales increase from reading from chief economists for the National Association of Realtors. Well, maybe if they had watched this show, they would have gotten a heads up, as everything is kind of stagnated right now. And it's frustrating for realtors because it's like they're being shut out. There's no work. And what no work means is, well, it means no income. It's gotten very flat, and it's become much of a buyer's market. And that sounds good, but it's probably not as great as we would like it to be. We'll see a lot of price reductions, and they're starting to happen as price growth could slow more broadly in the coming months. And this means, of course, any deceleration will likely be slow given the demand from millennials. And we got to consider this. And here's the thing. If they don't have jobs, they're not buying homes, and their savings rates are pretty low. So when you put this all together, you can see why top officials in the Biden administration are starting to panic. You see a town and a city like Chicago start to go down, and it tells you just how fast this is going to spread across the country. Simply put, the overall situation in Chicago is a warning sign for the rest of the country, and if the economy continues to worsen and spread, it could have significant political ramifications for the Biden administration, especially with the upcoming election. And with a matter of 6 months to the election, they face an impossible challenge of trying to get reelected during a recession. So it looks like it's going to be a very, very dangerous game as they face a seemingly impossible challenge of trying to get reelected during a recession. Thanks for watching, and don't miss any of these videos here next.